Hey guys, Davison here. So I'm going live with this because I wanted to make this video, but I won't be responding to questions until the end of this broadcast. So what I wanted to talk about is consent and what constitutes abuse in the era of Louis C.K. and Harvey Weinstein. Now, I'm sure you've read the headlines today about Louis C.K. responding to the allegations that he compulsively masturbated in front of many, many different women. The article that I read, it appears to be at least 5, although it could be as many as a dozen or more. The pattern always seemed to be the same with Louis C.K. He would identify women he found attractive within the context of work. He would invite them back to his hotel room or get them in a private office and then ask them if it was okay to masturbate in front of them. And by one report, though, I did read that he was disclosing his fantasies to a woman over the phone while masturbating, and he had not explicitly, from what I can tell, asked for her consent. But the rest of his transgressions or misconduct, or incidences of misconduct, were in the gray zone of consent. And basically, this really disturbs me, not only for women and what women must do to stop certain acts from occurring, but it also disturbs me for men, because now we've sort of entered an era wherein consent doesn't mean what it used to, and that one must always consider power dynamics whenever one is asking for consent for anything sexual. So what people are saying and what these women said is that because Louis C.K. was in a position of power, he couldn't ever obtain consent from these women. Even if they said yes, because they could fear for their jobs or because they admired him, they might say yes when they actually meant no. And that, for most of us, is highly confusing, because we left, I believe, in the 90s, the era of the no means no, meaning that it was just commonly accepted that if a man made a sexual advance towards you and you didn't want it, you would say no. But if you didn't say no, then you had consented, right? So it was all about making a move, and either the woman accepted the move or rejected the move. Then we moved recently, within the past 5 years, into the yes means yes. You can't just make a move on someone and then wait for them to reject you. You have to verbally ask for consent. Like, can I touch you now, before your hand starts to go on their thigh. But now, in the Harvey Weinstein, Louis C.K. sexual misconduct, sexual scandal era, where it's being outed that all these men in power with voracious sexual appetites were taking great advantage of their popularity and their power, it's not no means no. It's not yes means yes. It's, if you are in power, you can never ask for any form of sexual interaction with anyone other than someone that I think you've established an emotional relationship with. And I see how that gets confusing, and we as a society have to start to redefine what acceptable behavior is sexually, but not go so far away from sexual openness that everyone's afraid of making a false move, and that everyone's afraid that what they did that they thought was consensual will later come back and be questioned as to whether or not it was permissible or not. I don't know. I'm quite horrified, and I'm sure you guys are too, by just how many people have been subjected to sexual behavior that they didn't want to experience. And I would never blame women at all, but I do think, in so much as we need to educate people that if you are in a position of power, it's never acceptable to ask for sex or sexual favors, we also need to educate women and men that it's always okay to say no. And don't say yes, and don't stay silent if you actually don't want to be there, and don't worry about losing the job that you may or may not get, because you are going to lose that job anyways. And do you really want to sign a deal with the devil to get what you want? I think, like, for it, and in the instance of where the two women went back to Louis C.K.'s hotel room and he asked if he could take out his penis and masturbate, and then they said yes and laughed it off, and he proceeded to, I mean, if they were truly horrified, even though I am not blaming them as victims, I truly feel like they should have been like, no, like, dude, like, this is not okay. Or if they sat there and allowed him to do it, don't later then retroactively go back and be like, he abused me, he hurt me. I mean, then again, I know I am walking on, you know, thin ice in saying that, because back to what I said, that it was sexual misconduct on his behalf because he was in a position of power, so he had no business being unprofessional and putting these two women in that position. So yeah, I mean, I have a son, so I'm going to educate my son from now on to, I mean, always form an emotional relationship with a person and really get to know them and have it be outside of the context of work before taking it to a physical level, because it's just too risky now to behave any other way. And I don't know, I don't have all the solutions, and I feel sorry for everyone that's ever been victimized. I mean, have I ever been victimized by a man in power? Or has a man in power ever attempted to victimize or seduce? Because now we don't even use the word seduction anymore. Me? Of course. I've had a casting director try to get with me. And I guess I could talk about that experience. I mean, I actually don't feel traumatized by it. This dude was or is married. I don't know if he's been married twice now and he's on his second wife probably. But like, I ran into him in the context of like a professional conference, and he hit on me, and then years later he sent me a couple messages inviting me out on a date. He would always tell me that he thought I had beautiful tiger eyes or a mischievous smile. And like, ultimately, like, I guess like I never felt like, oh, he's implying that if I slept with him, he'd get me a role in something. I just more was like, oh, he's such a pig. Like, and I, you know, I laughed it off. And I think that's always been sort of my approach with whenever a man in power or a man in general hits on me and I'm not interested, unless it's overtly a threat, like they're putting their hand on my leg, they're touching me. And that only happened to me once within the context of something professional. There's a really creepy photographer who put his hand on my knee, but he never went further than that. Yeah, you know, I guess, I don't know if it's my mother that sort of is like, always like, oh, just laugh it off if, you know, you're not interested. But I guess the reason why I react the way that I do is because ultimately, like, as long as a guy doesn't take it to the point of, you know, actually doing something sexual in front of me, like masturbating or touching me, if he's saying stuff to me and I can end the conversation or run away, I just think of the guy as somebody who either tried or, you know, just think of them as a bit of a pig, and I move on. So back to like this whole what is consent, and people in power can never obtain consent and they should not abuse of their power. Do I think, what do I think? I'm sorry, I feel like I should have written down, you know, my points. Like, am I now rethinking all my interactions with these men? I guess so, but like, I mean, we all have to decide. I mean, are we all on the side of you can never blame someone for trying? You can never get angry at someone for hitting on someone? Or are we in the position that you have to become friends with someone and get to know someone for years before romance or physical contact enters into the equation? Because I feel like that makes us go back towards, you know, sex is reserved for marriage. Do you know what I'm saying? And I don't think I'm comfortable with that. But because there's so many potential partners, it's true that one should never fuck around with colleagues. I absolutely agree with that. When I was younger, I didn't think of the potential ramifications of that. But now that I'm older and given what has happened recently, yeah, I would never approach, for instance, anybody who worked at Google or anybody who worked at another startup that I work with. I would just completely write it off because it's just not worth the risk. It's not worth the risk to your reputation. It's not worth the risk of putting them in a bad position. And these things can be twisted and turned against you. So the safest way I think now to have any sexual interaction with a stranger is to, like, say, go on an app like Tinder where you know that the context is dating and it can never be misconstrued. So I want to know your guys' opinions. Like, what do you guys think about consent now? Do you think that someone in a position of power can ever obtain consent? And under what circumstances can they obtain consent? So I'm going to go to the questions now. I hope this was well spoken. So, oh, thank you, Respergo, for the $5. Davison, would you prefer to be less attractive to men to avoid sexual harassment? No, because like I was trying to explain with that casting director dude, I mean, I was like, he's trying. I'm sure he's tried with other women. He was like a Tony Soprano type guy and, like, you know, like macho guy who's like, hey, beautiful, you know, we should go to dinner sometime. I'm going to treat you right, lady. I'm like, dude, you're married. Like, go away. As you know, and because he never took it to the physical level of touching me or, you know, never said anything really explicit to me that was harassing and didn't persist after I clearly didn't want to hang out with him, I feel like it's like a guy who's married hit on me and let's move on. I just never want to think about this again. But given what's happened recently, yeah, I'm thinking about it again. I'm like, wow, that maybe was a little inappropriate of him, but I just think he wasn't just a pig with the people that he works with or could work with. I'm sure he was a pig towards the woman in the, you know, a woman in the supermarket, his hairdresser, you know, anybody that he thought was cute. He was, you know, he's an aggressive, dominant man. He's going to try. And it's up to me to reject him. So no, and in my work, I mean, I am deliberately sexually attractive to men on my main channel. And I accept that. I cultivate that. I play with it. I have fun with it. And I create an atmosphere where it's fully consensual. I have consented to it consciously. And you, if you are experiencing, experiencing it, you are welcome to make any comment you want because the context is very clear. I think consent is about context. And if I was, for instance, making a video where I was doing, I don't know, coloring book tutorials, yeah, it would be pretty inappropriate to go like, hey, Davison, you know, you have a great ass. But if I'm making a video where I'm like showing my butt and I'm like, hey guys, this is the stupid trend where, you know, I'm going to sit on a canvas and make a, you know, a print of a pumpkin with my butt, I've accepted that, you know, the comments are going to come in and that it's okay for people to make these comments. However, I've also constructed an atmosphere wherein there's a distance between myself and the person issuing the comment. It is clearly not a relationship of an in-person performance. It's clearly not an explicit invitation for a man to interact with me in a direct sexual way. It's merely a playful sexual performance with a degree of detachment. And I think most people get that. And just because a woman behaves sexy doesn't mean that she's consented to more than just a flirty exchange that ends at talking. So no, I mean, I don't want to be less attractive to men. I don't think any woman has to be. I think we're all sexual beings. I think we all have sexual needs. It's just choosing when it's appropriate to experience that and express that. Okay, so let's go back to your comments. So hello to Galile. Hello to Respergo. Hello. Hi, Stephen. Hi, Al. Hello to Mike. Mike says, power dynamic is not quantifiable. It leaves what is consensual up to public opinion. Yeah, okay, I'll get to that in a second, Mike. Al says, a question on power dynamics in politics. Did you notice that women politicians get kissed by male colleagues? I do not feel that this is right. Mike says, cheek kissing is a common tradition in European and Latin countries, and it is here where I live in Quebec. And I've been kissed by plenty of my coworkers, my bosses. It's actually impolite in certain circumstances to be cold and to refuse to kiss on the cheek. Have I noticed some men linger a little longer than they should on my cheeks? Maybe. Or they're overly enthusiastic about kissing my cheeks? Definitely. But provided they're not grabbing my tits or they don't smack their dick in my face, I'm like, this doesn't, so what? They think I'm cute. Big deal. Let's move on with this, right? They don't violate, you know, the context of what is a socially acceptable greeting. Okay, so back to, and should male politicians kiss women on the cheeks? Well, no, if it's like just randomly they did a good job at something, and so, you know, oh, hey, you know, Lindsay, you did a great job, let me give you a kiss on the cheek. That's probably inappropriate. But I don't, you know, but if it's like a greeting or like a special meeting and everybody's doing, like in Quebec or like in Europe, the bisous, the kisses on both cheeks, that's okay. Again, it's all about context. It's all about what the relationship is between the two people. And it's all about consent as well. So, Respergu, any advice on how to hit up a girl at the gym? I really don't think that this is the right broadcast for that. Sorry. I mean, my gut instinct is I don't think you should. You could try talking to her as a human being. And if you guys have like a connection, then maybe, you know, after you've hung out as human beings, you can bring it to the next level. But if it's just because you want sex, it's probably inappropriate. I don't know. Okay, so Stephen Simon says, not one person in the Terry Crews assault thread doubted him or questioned his motive in coming forward. It's hard. I'm not picking sides, but I don't know. And Al says, if men and women are supposed to be equals, I think a handshake would be sufficient. Yes, but again, if the cultural context is that everybody's kissing each other on the cheek, then I don't think that there's any difference between a handshake and the kiss on the cheek, other than in your culture, you feel like a kiss is far more intimate than someone in another culture. Like in Quebec, kissing on both cheeks is the equivalent of hugging someone. So there's not the sexual intent or baggage or context there. Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay. So back to what Mike said, Mike C. Power dynamic is not quantifiable. It leaves what was consensual up to public opinion. Well, yes, it is. Power dynamics are quantifiable. If you have more experience, money, public acclaim, and popularity than someone else, and you have hired them or you employ them in some way, you clearly have the power. So, for instance, myself, if I were to get a bunch of local YouTubers, no, this is a bad idea. This is a bad example. Like if I don't know, if I were to hire a cameraman, for instance, and then I would tell him that he had to, I don't know, this is so creepy. I don't like where I'm going with my own example. I don't want to use myself as an example because I just wouldn't. And as a woman, generally speaking, I'm not the one who's the sexual aggressor. I don't know if that's because of the way that we've all been socialized in our sexist sometimes or gender rolled society, or that biologically women just are not as sexually interested as men are. You know, our desires are much more infrequent and they're usually emotional. Not all women, but most women. So Mike is saying, yes, but it gets tricky when people are on the rise or the fall. For instance, Louis wasn't always big. When he is too big or too small. Well, okay, if we can't figure out the power dynamic in any of Louis C.K.'s sexual interactions, it was always clear, though, that work was around them. So maybe if you don't think about power, you should, back to what I keep repeating, think about context. don't try to hook up in the context of work ever. It's just a bad idea, because you don't know what the person you're, trying to hook up with is thinking, and you don't know what they're going to say or do with that information or that interaction in the future. So as a self-protective measure and as a measure of respect, don't bring it to a sexual place. Find someone else. Go on Tinder, go on Bumble, whatever, hit up your ex-girlfriend. Just do not go there. And back to what Stephen was saying, like blaming the women who went back to see Louis C.K.'s hotel room. I wasn't blaming them. I'm just saying that we need to teach women to be more overt when they're not comfortable in saying no, and to not fear the repercussions of saying no. Because most creeps or most pervs, when you say no to them, they're so used to being rejected that they don't even take it personally, because their sexual advances on you weren't personal in the first place. Yeah. But I mean, of course it can go in the direction where there are false allegations. I think they're uncommon. Or what I was worried about as well is exaggerated allegations, or reframing an experience you had and turning it into something traumatic when it wasn't actually traumatizing. Do you know what I'm saying? Back to that casting director guy. If I went back now, I was like, oh, I have a story about this ex guy. Everyone should know he hit on me, 8 different times, and he wanted to take me out for dinner, and he was always complimenting me, and if I would have given him the go-ahead, he would have, and he implied that he could get me a role if I was smart. Like, no, I'm not going to do that, because he stopped as soon as I communicated that I was disinterested, and I don't know if that would help anybody else, me outing him. And culture was different back when he hit on me. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I'm sort of afraid of. I don't want people now making sexual misconduct mountains out of shitty, sleazy behavior. Like, there has to be a place where we can just call certain behavior sleazy without turning it into a melodrama. Do you feel me? I don't know. Am I damning myself by saying this? I mean, I'm trying to figure it out as well. So Elsa said, so as per your example, if you do not make the cut in the audition, then a few weeks later you get a call for a date. Oh, well, no, I just think back to what I was saying. Don't mix sex and work ever. So that it's not acceptable. It's just not. If say, for instance, though, I worked with this director on a film, and we got to know each other over a period of like a year, and we'd hung out, and, we then had dinner, and then it was clear that both of us were interested, then maybe. But like, just randomly out of the blue, you don't get cast in something and the director hits you up. No. Again, don't mix sex and business and pleasure. Don't mix sex and work. And then nobody suffers. So Stephen says, my issue is with people's reactions to this. What happened to innocent until proven guilty? With the way this is going, it's only a matter of time before false accusations start to happen and people lose their lives and jobs for no reason, which is exactly what I was saying. Like, there has to be a place where we can say, behavior is sleazy, behavior is inappropriate, or behavior is outright abusive, right? Or behavior is sexual assault, because it's a spectrum of behavior. Like, one cannot put getting hit on by a sleazy casting director and him asking me out to dinner on the same level as casting director like Harvey Weinstein forces me to have oral sex with him, which never happened. And yeah, I don't want everyone to get hyped up, and this is, even though these men are guilty, I worry that we are actually now starting sort of a bit of a witch hunt. Do you guys agree or disagree with me? I mean, some of these men are fucking witches. But Louis C.K. said, although some women disagree with this because he did not obtain consent over the phone, that it was always consensual whenever he would ask to masturbate. But again, back to what I was saying in the beginning, when you're in a position of power, it's never acceptable to ask for sex. And also, it is also never acceptable to make sexual advances in the context of work. However, yeah, it was consensual. So now we're going after men that at least tried to obtain consent. And we're doing so in an era where that was what we have been told as a society is acceptable. As long as you ask permission, you're allowed to do anything sexual. Well, clearly we have now discovered that that is not the case and shouldn't be the case because of the power imbalances. But yeah, I feel like where no sexual assault outright occurred, I feel like we shouldn't destroy as many men as possible. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, clearly a lot of these men are sexually compulsive and they clearly have a pattern of, you know, trying to get with as many people as they can. But I don't know. I feel like we need to approach this with a very fair and balanced approach. Like we need to be fair and balanced in our approach of towards any sexual interactions we have with the people in our lives and any sexual interactions we've ever had with the people we interacted with in the past. But moving forward, the rules are clearly different. Okay, so what was Mike saying? So Mike says, actually, you're probably the least damning person I've seen. This stream is the only one that is actually able to talk about it with making it a witch hunt. Well, that's why I started this stream, because I'm like, we need to talk about consent, because all of these problems are being created by we don't have an agreement on what constitutes consent and when consent is acceptable to ask for. I'm just scrolling through your comments. So Al said, Al South said, it's hard to say, in a way, that is why women are afraid to come forward on sexual assault, because the women gets berated. Well, I think women are getting less berated now, which is good. But yeah, no, there's no but. Well, the but is only from before. Let's not turn this into an overblown drama wherein we need to have a discussion and define better boundaries. So Raspergo says, don't worry, Davison, you have my consent. Well, thank you, Raspergo. Ayu said, these women are ungrateful. I would pay for Louis C.K. to... I shouldn't laugh, but I would pay for Louis C.K. to masturbate in front of me. Well, I mean, that's a joke. Clearly you're joking. They're not ungrateful. If you don't want a dude, to jerk off in front of you, you're allowed to say no. I certainly wouldn't want Louis C.K. to jerk off in front of me. No thanks. No thanks, Dad. Keep that sausage in your pants, Dad. Yeah. He's a compulsive masturbator. That's what we learned about Louis C.K. this week. I think he truly does have an issue. His problem is that he probably is constantly tormented by the urge to masturbate. And I sort of do feel sort of sorry for him. I think it's disgusting what he did. I think it's stupid. And I think it's unfair to the women that he kept asking. But yeah, he's definitely got a sexual, compulsivity problem. And it's very specific fetish. So Dizzy says, hey stranger, I've been out of the country for a while, but I wanted to say hi and connect with you. I'm still around. It's great to see you. You look fantastic. Hope all has been well. Thank you, Dizzy. So Stephen Simmons says, say no. I don't know what you were saying in the context of saying no. Hold on, let me just move my pillow back. I'm sort of uncomfortable on the sofa. I also back to what Raspergo had been saying, I don't know. All of our sexual baggage is coming out this year in North America and in the media. I guess that happens periodically in culture. And so it's just going through this readjustment phase. And I just hope we end up on the side of balance instead of on the side of women need to, you know, start wearing burqas and be married before they have sex. I don't want us to go back to sexually conservative times. And I don't want to go back to like having strained interactions between the sexes. I want us to just arrive at like this positive place, right? Maybe not everyone has the intelligence though to define consent properly. I would hope, you know, I would hope that we can educate people, or as many people as possible. But I think a lot of this is, because everybody is different and everyone experiences and understands the world differently. Okay, so I'm going to go back to what you said. I may be ending this broadcast soon if we don't talk anymore, because I think I've almost said everything I have to say. And I look forward to receiving any comments that you have in the comment section. If you are watching this later, if you agree with my belief that consent can never be obtained when someone is in a position of power, consent should never be demanded, or because you should never make sexual requests in the context of work. If you want to interact with someone sexually, do so in a context where it's very explicit, like on an app like Tinder, or you need to get to know someone supremely well before sex even enters the equation. So casual sex is risky, and casual sex is especially risky if you are someone who has a lot to lose or who is a public figure. But context matters in terms of what is behaviorally acceptable. Our social agreements matter in terms of what is acceptable, and women need to learn how to say no and not feel guilty about it, and our culture needs to encourage that any unwanted advances, it's always okay to say no, and it's no big deal. And that's that. I think that I resumed everything that I've said in this broadcast. Okay guys, well, it was nice hanging out with you. I think there was one more comment. Dizzy says, have you ever heard of the Baroness von sketch show? I thought they were Canadian, but the States ended up getting the show, and absolutely hilarious and genius comedy. Yes, I have. They're cool. Stephen said, my criticism was not that we should automatically assume guilt in all allegations of sexual assault. I don't think that's the solution at all. Well, I mean, yes, the courts exist for a reason, but I think, I mean, ultimately though, the majority of times, statistically, it plays out that most people do not make false allegations. But are we encouraging people to revisit almost innocuous or meaningless interactions with people in power? Yes, because it made me think about something tonight that I had not thought about before, and I could turn that into a scandal, but I'm not going to, because I didn't suffer. Nobody suffered. So Lars says, is this lady talking with the chat and reading it, or is this a non-interactive experience? No, this person is, yes, interacting with chats. Did you have a question? Because I was wrapping up the broadcast, because I said a lot of what I had to say at the beginning, and I feel like I'm becoming repetitive. Oh, hi team. Team says, I arrived a bit late. I want to say hi. Hi team. So Lars says, sorry, then I was just reading of Mr. C.K. Oh, so what did you want to ask about Louis C.K.? I mean, I had said before that the reason why, even though he obtained consent to masturbate in front of certain women, it was invalid, was because you can never obtain consent. This is the new thought by our society if you are in a position of power and or it's within the context of work. I'm just waiting to see what you say. It's nice to see you, team, by the way. So Laura says, I was getting more disappointed the more I read. Still, I enjoy his art even now. Yeah, well, this is the other thing that people have been discussing. Should you separate the art from the artist? Like, even if he's done these bad things, even if Kevin Spacey has been a piece of shit, does that mean the art is garbage? No. Very talented people can do very bad things. I know this because I am in the arts, and trust me when I say a lot of the YouTubers you know that come across as these really nice, caring, sweet, kind people in private, a lot of them are narcissistic, flaming piles of garbage. They're assholes. Are they still great artists? Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, an axe murderer could have made you your car. Your car's still gonna work. So yes, you know, you're allowed to appreciate your car. It's just unfortunate that it happened to be made by an axe murderer. You're allowed to find Louis C.K. funny. He made a lot of comedy based on his own compulsive masturbatory struggles. But moving forward, you know, should he be given the same opportunities? Probably not, because that puts him back into the context where he abuses of his power. So, yeah, I mean, you're allowed to appreciate a work without guilt. Just because it was made by someone who has done bad things, I mean, that doesn't mean that the work is suddenly garbage. But that probably maybe should limit that artist's ability to produce more in the future, barring, you know, them going through treatment and making amends and whatnot. I mean, I think it looks like per Louis C.K.'s apology, which I think he tried to do the best he could in penning that apology. He's trying to make amends. He openly admitted to having a problem. Is it sincere? Is it insincere? You know, maybe a bit of both. I think not everybody has their demons. I mean, but we're all flawed people. We've all made mistakes. We've all done stupid things. I do not have the problem of compulsive masturbation, but he does. So at least he came public and he didn't deny it. He didn't go like, these women are liars. I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, Kevin Spacey, for instance, for years denied the fact that he was homosexual. And, you know, would bury people. And Weinstein was even worse. He hired he hired private detectives to try to stop the truth from coming out. He was absolutely evil. He was, you know, a sociopathic, mad genius in terms of the way that he dealt with it. So at least Louis C.K., yeah, he's tried to, he admitted to it. He's apologized, and, you know, will he ever probably be free of his desire to compulsively masturbate? Probably not. That is probably, unfortunately, his thing. So he's going to have to find a healthy way to deal with that. So Kevin Spacey's a weirdo. Well, I heard also Kevin Spacey was abused as a child. So he then ended up abusing other people as an adult. That's the sad story about him. Does that, you know, absolve him of his guilt? No, but it explains his behavior a little bit. So Lars says, I also think he's mostly an exhibitionist, Louis C.K. That is a weird fetish to have. Being an exhibitionist as a woman is a bit less problematic, or so as I was told by a miss. Team says, I think it's a good I think it's a good thing that these stories are coming out. And Steven says, Simon says he needs rehab. Yeah, well, he definitely, Louis C.K. definitely needs therapy. And a healthy way to deal with his desire to masturbate in front of strangers. I think men sometimes live with this demon inside of them, from what I hear, because I am a woman, and so I just don't care about sex that much. I get more, I said this to my friend the other day, I'm like, I derive more pleasure out of making money. Okay, making money, succeeding in business, making a fucking good video. I get more pleasure out of that than anything that could possibly transpire in the bedroom. I don't think about it that much. Maybe I have a few dreams, but like on the scope of how many times a day I'm like, let's think about sex. It is, certain times of the month it's more than others, but it is mostly like I don't care. And I care way less than when I was younger. Like when I was younger and friskier and maybe more fertile, I was like, yeah, this is exciting. But I've done it all, seen it all, been there, done that, bought the cake, wrote the book. So back to what I was getting to. I'm not tortured by sex. Occasionally, like, it makes me like boys that I shouldn't, because the moment a lot of women are sexually attracted to a man, they have feelings for them regardless of whether or not the feelings are justified. But other than that, like, it's just this thing that I can, like, bury and just go work on my shit. So men, though, it's like a demon inside of you. It's like a, you know, and I think most men during their adolescence learn, and I don't want to call it a demon because that, you know, demonizes male sexuality, but like, it's this impulse, this strong impulse inside of you, from what I understand, because again, I'm not a man, that you have to learn to, like, manage. So how you manage that is that, like, say you're in a monogamous relationship, but you still desire other women, you turn to pornography. Or say you're in a monogamous relationship and the woman doesn't want to interact with you sexually, you turn to pornography because you don't want to hurt her, you don't want to go to a hooker, you don't want to do with this other shit. Or you also learn that an erection doesn't mean that you need to do anything with it. It doesn't mean that you need to help a woman that gives you an erection, or put yourself at risk and make a stupid decision that, you know, costs you money, costs you sanity. That's what I understand. So I think that it's complicated, and so that we need to be compassionate sometimes as to how, you know, we need to be compassionate towards people that struggle with that, you know, their impulses. Does that make sense? Okay, I'm just going back here. Oh yeah, so Al says, that's irony, Davison, that you don't give a fuck about sex since your video says sexual innuendo. Yeah, well, maybe that is like, well, I'd said at certain times in my past, I'm like, I knew another sex writer, who was like, yeah, the funny thing is like, it's like this, the classic tale of a sex writer who actually has a terrible sex life, or like a non-existent sex life. It's like, maybe it's their outlet. I mean, but my work isn't that sexual, you know what I mean? It's not like I'm doing sexual performances. I'm not a webcam model. You know, I'm not actually engaging in sexual acts with my work, but I discuss sexuality, and I'm flirty about it, I suppose. And I'm not ashamed of, like, showing off my body, and it's well received. It's fun. Maybe back to what Lars had been saying is it easier to be a female exhibitionist? Maybe I have an exhibitionistic streak. I mean, I think most performers do. Whether or not that's sexualized varies between performer to performer. Well, the reason why a woman who's an exhibitionist will have less problems than a man is because heterosexual men on average have higher sexual appetites and openness than women. So if a woman were to say to a lot of different men, hey, do you mind if I masturbate in front of you? Most men would either, again, because they don't see sex in the same way as women do, they would just be like, nah, I'm not interested, and laugh it off. Or they would be open to it and just go for it. Versus women, I think that, you know, the requirements, generally speaking, are higher to actually engage in anything sexual. And because a woman, quite frankly, it's a lot easier for us to be raped than men, we have a greater fear, I think, in general, of sex and sexual interactions than a man would have. Because it would be very unlikely that a woman would sexually, you know, assault a male in most circumstances, at least, you know, in adult circumstances. Okay, so, sorry. I'm just going back to what you're saying. So Lars says, I'm glad I'm not Louis C.K.'s daughter. Yeah. Alcel says, Hollywood's probably a lot more evil. Ultimate Ninja says, hello, Ultimate Ninja. By the way, something happened on VidMe, and it said you unsubscribed. There's been issues with some people, so if there's any issues that you're having, email hello@vidme.com and they'll fix it. So Ultimate Ninja said, I bet it was still kind of comical. Louis C.K. just blocked the door and jerked off in front of me without consent. Well, he did ask. Yeah, well, back to what I was saying, like, if I was those women and I thought it was disgusting, I mean, maybe they were drunk though, but I would have found a way to get the fuck out of there or get him to stop. And I almost think, yeah, or I would, if I was very worried about what he was about to do, I wouldn't go to his fucking hotel room, especially not at my age. Maybe when I was younger and I was like 18 or 19 and still naive, I might have gone to his hotel room and expect no shenanigans to happen. But I think now, at my age, the context is, implies that the person that you are going to hang out with may attempt something. So Mike says, what's really traumatizing? Over-exaggerating, but like, when will we start burning the Kama Sutra? No one's an angel. I saw a guy masturbate at the gym in the gym shower, so I just didn't shower that day. Well, back to what I was saying, women don't experience sex, I think, a lot of the time the same way as men do, because men, it's a functional part of their being, or it's an impulse that is so ingrained in them that they take it as less of a big deal as women, who it takes a lot more for us to get aroused. Our sexual needs are much different, and we can be raped. So, I mean, not that men can't be raped, but we are more likely to be, or more at risk of being raped. So, yeah, a penis is a more threatening thing to a woman than to a man. Do you understand? That's gross that guy did that. I'm sorry he did that. That's like, dude, like, go in the bathroom stall. Like, really? Just in the middle of the frickin' gym, you're gonna take it out? God, fucking gross. So Lars says, this culture that demonizes sex more than violence creates issues. I wasn't asking though. It's a biological reason. Men aren't usually the gatekeepers, sexually speaking. That's correct. And I do agree with that. I mean, my work supports that. I do think that violence is something that we should be more concerned with as a culture than sex. But that said, sex can be problematic because it's tied with power, and it's easy to manipulate people through sex or exploit people through sex. So I think both issues have different problems that need to be resolved. And at different stages in, history, we've had different issues with regards to either sex or violence. So now we're at the crossroads of, we had a really sexually open culture for a long time. You can find and see anything on the internet. People can get their claims out or their stories out easier on the internet. So how do we approach sex now that we're in a very public, interconnected society? And I think it just means that you have to be a hell of a lot more careful. And now that we've, achieved more of a society that has gender parity and rights parity between the sexes, we can't make men the pursuer and then women the acceptor or rejectors. We need to be more egalitarian in our approach to sex. I almost think that, we need to be more conservative, or at least, if we're going to call that conservative, maybe it's just be more emotionally respectful and aware in any sexual interaction you're going to have. Because you have to be. The consequences are just potentially too devastating if you don't pay attention. So Dennis says, grabbing, groping, and other inappropriate behaviors happen to men by both men and even occasionally women far more often than is reported. So Lars says it happens very often, especially if you're good looking. Usually it's ass grabs. Yeah, well, as I had said, I think that well, of course, gay men are going to try to come on to other men. And the reason why men don't report it is that men see sexual advances as less of a threat than women do. And probably to a certain degree, men are less at risk of an overt sexual assault than women in most circumstances, right? Of course, child molestation, that can happen to both genders. Of course, you know, there are larger men that can overpower, like in prison, you know, a smaller man. I mean, though, really, I mean, if you do look at statistics, unfortunately, I don't know if it's biological predisposition or it's because men were socialized to be the aggressors sexually. You know, yes, there are more sexual assaults committed by men than by women. That doesn't mean that women don't abuse. They do. There are female child molesters. There are, you know, teachers that pursue their 13-year-old students. So they're female pedophiles, but they are statistically much less rare. But I mean, anybody who's a victim is a victim. Like Terry Crews was a victim. And all of it needs to stop, right? Sexual exploitation needs to stop, regardless of gender. I mean, the only, you know, like, okay, I guess it's good that we bring awareness that it can happen to anyone, just so that we turn it into an issue that we all need to take responsibility for instead of just one gender. Yes, sexual exploitation is not just the responsibility of men, it is also the responsibility of women. So that's why we're having these conversations and I'm doing this live broadcast right now. So Eamon says, statistics are not accurate in this case, men don't talk about it. Well, I mean, and yes, I think they are. I think that if men were getting raped anally, left, right, and center, I really do believe that there would be, for sure, far more frequently. I don't doubt, though, that certain men have not felt comfortable coming forward, but there would be a lot more police reports. I mean, statistics do support, absolutely, and this is not unfair of me to say that, you know, women are much, and children more likely to be victims of sexual assault than men, unfortunately. So Dennis says, advances are either seen as flattering or a thing to be embarrassed by due to social stigma. You mean advances by gay men or advances by women hitting on men inappropriately? Well, I mean, it's back to like pointing fingers at either gender doesn't help. What's going to help is defining when is it appropriate to interact with someone sexually, what is consent, and what is a healthy sexual relationship, and how do you get your sexual needs met in a healthy way. So, my understanding now of consent, as I said at the beginning of this broadcast, is that you need to ask someone before you interact with them sexually, before you lay a hand on them, and they have to say yes, it's enthusiastic consent before any sexual interaction can occur. That's in an ideal circumstances when you're first starting out with someone. Consent should never be requested when you are in a position of power over someone else, when you are their boss, when you are substantially older, you know, when the person you are asking has something to lose or could be put in an awkward position by a sexual request. It should not be made, the request. And I don't know. I think that it's just safer to build relationships first and then arrive at sex later, and just delay your pursuit of sexual gratification as opposed to thinking that in a sexually open society it's okay to go for sex first and sex is just sex and people should be allowed to just, you know, and I do believe people should be allowed to do what they want amongst consenting adults, but perhaps we weren't acknowledging that the emotional component, you know, matters, and that maybe certain types of sexual satisfaction aren't worth pursuing and are too dangerous and too risky. And maybe sometimes people do consent to things that they shouldn't be consenting to. So if we all approach sex as like a respectful, emotional, trust-based thing, then we would all be better off. I don't know. I'm sorry I'm rambling. I feel like I'm absolutely rambling. Okay, so Laura says, we're all going to end up like Demolition Man if we are unlucky. I saw that movie, but I forget the reference. So Ultimate Ninja said, VidMe handles payments differently than other subscription-based things. I subscribed, but it didn't commit to auto payments. Oh, I canceled it thinking I'd still have the rest of the month paid for. Uh-oh. But it ended immediately, although I had paid, so I got screwed. Oh, no. Email hello@vidme.com, and I think they'll fix it for you. I'm sorry that happened. I need to know about what, you know, what they do to my subscribers, because I just presumed that it would be like, you subscribe for a term. So say you pay for 30 days, you get the 30 days, and if you cancel, then it ends at the end of the 30 days. But that doesn't appear to be the case, so I apologize for that. So yes, just email them and be like, hey dudes, I paid, I canceled, or I decided not to do a recurring payment. Could you please re-enable my subscription? And I'm sure they will, because that's only fair. It's not fair that as soon as you cancel, like, you lose access to everything. But I guess maybe to them, the definition of a subscriber is like paid active. Yeah, it makes sense. Just write to them. I'm sure they'll tell them that, you know, I think that it's only fair that you get into the end of the month. You paid for it. Okay, so Dennis says, you could not be right. Building a relationship before sex is always healthy and less likely to produce victimizing situations, but biology in years, many of a regressive culture not wanting to address sexuality at all, and even consent, have landed us in a mess. Well, yes, I agree. I think that 2 years ago, though, at the dawn of Tinder, we actually were getting more towards, you know, a point where it was like, you know, hookup culture, where as long as there was consent, everyone was chill. But now we are revisiting consent, so things are a lot more touchy now. Yeah, so I don't know. I don't have the full answer. Just maybe, like I said, err on the side of caution now. Err on the side of relationship building for sex, as opposed to pursuing casual sex, because casual sex maybe now is too risky. I know that sounds crazy to say, but yeah, I mean, I even think about like the Facebook conversations that I have now, like, or, you know, I mean, I'm never, ever inappropriate on other, you know, platforms or even on Facebook itself. But like, yeah, if you're talking to a friend and you don't know if they're into you or not, like, you have to be really careful about what you say or the jokes you make, or I don't know. Yeah, we're in really confusing times. I don't know where we'll end up. Okay, so thanks, Stephen. I'm just amazed with how some action flicks with Stallone became so relevant to modern society, overtly PC culture specifically. Oh, so Imin says, do you think canceling his great work like Netflix and HBO was a solution? Well, I had said this before, because Louis C.K.'s art enables him to be in a position of power where he can sexually exploit other people. Yes, they probably did do the right thing, because he's never going to address his issues until his power is challenged. So his past work shouldn't be buried forever, I don't think. But I mean, yeah, I agree with their decision to end his series, because he did something very wrong. And is it sort of like sad? Yes. But, you know, he made the choice to request to masturbate in front of people, so now he's suffering the consequences. And he's probably going to get treatment now, I would say, and learn to deal with his impulses in a healthier way. Okay, guys say. Okay, guys, so thank you for joining me for this broadcast. If you have any other questions, just leave them in the comment section down below. I'm at Davison Video everywhere on social media. My main channel is Davison Space Video. This is my vlogging channel. I do work that's sometimes flirty, but I think it's fun, and it's definitely consensual. And yeah, we are living through some pretty tumultuous times. So love and light to you all. You guys have a wonderful evening. Thanks for talking with me, Mike. Thanks to Raspergus, Steven, Lars, Eamon, Dennis, Ultimate Ninja. Who else? I knew there were some other people. Mike C, Al South, and see how far I can scroll up. Dizzy1122, Team, and Galile for showing up. So bye, guys. Have a great evening.